Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to talk to you all about, of course, your Nashville Soccer Club. Clay Trainham is here, and also what? Oh no, wait, he's not here. He's not. That's unbelievable. Valaire's not here because he's in Belize. That's why it was unbelievable.
I think everyone figured that out, Steven.
Oh, I've been using that joke a lot lately. It's been really fun to do. Valaire's having a great time though. He is starting to understand that he loves boats, and now wants to own a boat. So that's the most Valaire update I have for you at the current moment.
I
Um,
feel like that's a big part of your 30s is you get to the want to own a boat frame of mind. And then when you get to your 40s, you go buy a boat, and then you realize that it's not maybe the best investment that you could possibly make. And then you spend your 50s trying to get rid of it. And then your 60s just realizing that you never will. I think that that's the natural progression of a man in Tennessee. I think like we
does
see
that
that repeated so many times throughout.
I feel like does that fit the same thing for a pool too, where it's just like, oh, I really want this, and then you realize, oh, wait, I don't want to have to maintain this because then it doesn't matter to you like half the year, so you just don't want to keep maintaining it. I think that kind of fits. This is really good distracting talk because I don't know how much I want to ask Clay. How weekend sup? How do you want to go about this?
Well, you know, if anybody's following my Twitter, they know that there's some very important kind of sad things going on family wise. And then we had a tree fall at our house. And then I had to watch Nashville play Montreal. And I'm not sure how to rank these in order.
When you said that you were going to describe it, I did not think of that was the way that you were going to describe it.
Um, that's obviously not serious. I was the soccer game is the least serious of all those things, fortunately. But it's a awful, dreadful thing to watch. I'll tell you what. Not a fun. We did the historic Nashville tour of the Parthenon, which was fine. It was outside. I thought we were going to be inside, so I didn't care for that. And went to go see the Fall Guy. Let me tell you,
Oh,
the Fall Guy is a much better use of 2 hours than Nashville versus Montreal. And I could watch the Fall Guy 100 times in a row, and I would tell you it's still a better use than watching Nashville versus Montreal for the first time. it was it was it was not a great game, but we had some stuff. We had a cookout at the house yesterday. Despite the tree falling, we had people over and served up smoked meats. And my smoker caught fire in the middle of all this. So just a great weekend.
yeah, you didn't even mention that part to me. Do you know what's also better than watching Nashville soccer? Watching the Washington Spirit play. Wow. Okay, so I decided to shut Valaire and Clay up both and do two soccer matches over this weekend where the Washington Spirit and WSL team played on Friday and DC United played on Saturday. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do both. This sounds like a good time to get both of my soccer matches in. I loved being able to go to an NWSL game. It was actually pretty full in there. I'm not going to lie. I want to say there was about 10 or 11,000 there for a match, which was super cool. Um, the Washington Spirit ended up winning. Trinity Rodman might be one of the most fun players to just watch play soccer, just both in men's and women's soccer. Like she was just doing things that like would make the whole stadium gasp. Like she nutmegged one like the first defender after her first touch in like 1 minute of the game, and I was just like jumping up and down. Um, so that was really fun. Also, I'm still trying to learn how to watch soccer as a normal fan and just a normal spectator. It, I I'm not there yet specifically. Um, I was sitting there in the supporter section where everybody's like booing like a call that was absolutely like unobjectively not a foul, but everybody thought it was a pen. And I'm sitting there being like, I'm not that hardcore into this team yet, where like I agree that I'll get there eventually, maybe with the Spirit, but it was fun. And then when going to the DC United game, where apparently I can sit here and make jokes about Chicago all day long, but the problem with Chicago is the fact that Xander Shaqiri is on the pitch at times. And when he's not on the pitch, they actually look like a really good team. So that was extremely fun to watch as well. Plus, I got to go with a coworker and all that stuff. So yeah, I went to two soccer matches at Audi Field over the weekend. Um, So that was fun to watch. And on my phone, I did have Nashville SC popped up against Montreal, where, I could watch the I could watch the DC United match and randomly look down at my phone to see that, oh, Nashville's doing the same thing they've done a lot of the time, and I don't even have to worry about it. I do think it's funny just from like a managerial standpoint as well. A lot of people were just kind of expecting like just something different to happen, even with like an interim head coach. Um, and I don't necessarily want to like be in the same way of being like, I told you so in a sense, but like this stuff is going to take a lot more time. Actually, somebody brought up a really good point. And Clay, I do want to ask you about this now because I think it's something because of the fact that DC United's GM is Alan McCann, who came from
Ali Mackay.
Nashville. Alan McKay, who came from Nashville last year. Was he the secret sauce when it came to the because I mean apparently they really like the moves that he's been making in DC and righting a lot of the wrong shit that has been for the past few years. Was he part of the secret sauce that we don't have anymore?
Um, I don't know. I think it's a decent question. I feel like so the reason that Ali was hired, one, he played for Mike Jacobs at the University of Evansville. Also, he dated a friend of mine in high school. So
Of course.
shout out there. But it is very funny to me. But I I've heard some stories about certain players that were signed by NSC that maybe Ali was excited about. So I'm not fully committed to there. Ali and Mike are very much from like the same school of thought on
Same
a lot
cloth,
of
right.
things. And so I would be hesitant to really lean into that particularly hard. And I think that it's worth noting, like the problem that Nashville has had and that people are looking at Nashville's squad and saying is that they haven't been ambitious enough. They haven't taken enough risks. They haven't, signed these other guys that can elevate Nashville past where they are. But where Nashville is better than where DC United has been for years.
Right.
So like DC United is trying to get to where Nashville is in terms of being consistently in the playoffs, consistently, a decent team that's hard to beat. That's what
Right.
DC United is trying to be. And so I understand the question here, but like if DC can have the last 4 years that Nashville had, then
It
that would
would
be an
take that all day
improvement.
long.
Yeah, that
Yes.
would be an improvement. The question is, what do they do after that? And that's where Nashville is right now. Is they laid the groundwork, they laid the foundation. They didn't take the next step. It didn't come off.
Right.
Can this current group of people make that next step happen, or is it going to get stagnant and kind of level off and maybe start to hit the downslope? And that's really what Mike is tasked with now in year 5. So it's a good joke and it's worth mentioning, but at the same time, there's a little bit of caveats to think about there.
Well,
And,
yeah.
and really, like that's where I find this managerial search so interesting because I don't know that we've seen anything from Nashville since the changes happened that is an improvement. And I
No.
think I said this last week. I think there was maybe some concerns that Gary Smith would beat Atlanta and it would make that change impossible to happen. Because if you want to make a change, you need to make the change when you decide to make it. And um, if we don't see someone coming in soon, I think it gives the appearance that they just made a change for a short term, level off than with long term goals in mind. And that to me would be worrying.
Yeah.
Uh, Now we have no information. Like we don't know. They could announce a manager tomorrow. I doubt they will because,
And yeah,
but
because we're definitely having our pod one day late, so that absolutely means they're going to do
yeah,
it now.
yeah. So they could announce a change. I doubt. I imagine there's going to be a press conference alert and things like that. But they could announce a change tomorrow, and then maybe this looks a little silly in retrospect, but Nashville tends to move kind of deliberately. And if this was your plan, I'm not necessarily sure that this is the plan that gets you back into the playoffs,
Right.
before
And
the
it's
manager comes in. And we were given the indication that this was they weren't bailing on this year's team. So if you're not bailing on this year's team and you're using an interim manager, you would hope that that means that the new manager is going to be coming in. And unfortunately, I mean, it's probably for the best, honestly, but unfortunately, unlike in England or other countries, you don't really hear are they interviewing candidates or what's going on. It's kind of all people judging flights and things like that. So you can't
yeah.
really tell what's going on behind the scenes. But my gut feeling is that if we don't have any concrete information on this front at the after the next two games, because it's a 2 game week, I understand it's a little bit complicated, then I'm going to be starting to wonder, well, what was the point?
Yeah, I mean, and you heard, I mean, even from the beginning, Mike Jacobs talked about, with his interview after, the Atlanta match, talking about this is going to be, a process they want to take time with and they want to make sure they're doing like due diligence with. But if you do believe in the season, like you got to have a manager that is going to be able to come in and implement his ideas, and try to get this team back on a different foot where you you give this team another month, like what are you going to wait till Leagues Cup to hire another manager? There can't be any way. Like you have to have somebody. I feel like here in the next, I don't know, over under. Do you think the new manager comes in the next 2 weeks?
I mean, I would hope so. I would hope we at least know. I mean, it is helpful, like if you think about it in terms of like the League's Cup is coming in, and the League's Cup can kind of, because of MLS, all it takes is a couple of good results, and you're back in the playoff hunt. And the League's Cup is sort of a natural break that you can bring in somebody and get going. It's just so I would hate if that was the plan. If the plan was to fire Gary Smith and then play more than a month before, you know,
The
starting
new
League's Cup,
right.
like that just seems like such wasted energy. And I don't
And
know.
if
I don't
yeah,
know.
I
I
mean
will
if you
go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, and if you do believe, I mean, we're in, we're at 16 points. We're in 11th place. We're 2 points behind DC United with a game in hand to DC United to get into the playoff. And then 6 points behind the next team up, but we still have another game in hand. Like, we are not far from this line at all. It just depends on how much you believe this roster is going to take you there.
Yeah, and I don't think that we've seen. I'm interested to see this week. I think this week is going to be very telling. I I'm not expecting a whole lot. We'll get to the previewing it later, but I'm not expecting a whole lot is out of the game against Cincinnati, unfortunately. But New England, I think,
God,
is a
that
real
sucks
barometer.
so much to hear. If we get a point, I'd be
Yeah,
so happy.
yeah, but New England is the real barometer because look, we'll talk about the game in the next segment, but it was a boring game in Montreal, but it wasn't that weird a Nashville setup. They were clearly happy to let Montreal possess the ball, make them try and break you down. That's a fairly standard road tactic that we've seen out of NSC, and it's worked out pretty well to be in the grand scheme of things for NSC, even if it doesn't make for exciting soccer.
Right.
Um, but if they come home against, you know, the worst, one of a team that's on track to be one of the worst teams in history in New England, and they play like they did against Atlanta or against Montreal, then there's going to be some real, or Toronto for that matter, there's going to be some real questions asked as to what the point of all this was.
Right.
And I think
And I,
I think it's totally fair.
well, yeah, and then I think that just kind of like it either confirms or denies what we're talking about, where it's either an all group together and it's not just the coach.
Yeah. And you have Hani Mukhtar, who is not, you know, this isn't a vintage season for him, but he's one of the best players in the league. Everyone knows he's one of the best players in the league. Walker Zimmerman's the best defender in the league. You've got guys on the roster that are good veterans. And if you're just willing to throw the season away in May in a league like this, I just have some real questions as to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily mean like at this point expectations have changed because the season has started and you can't really we expect more out of this team this year than what we've gotten. But now this team can't miss the playoffs with who they have on the roster. And if the front office is willing to just miss the playoffs to deal with an interim manager, um, then I think that that's a real thing that everyone should question pretty vociferously. Now, again, we say all this, they could announce a manager tomorrow, but on the basis of what we know now, I would really hope that there's some movement in the next week or so.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be up to date on all of that. We're unfortunately going to talk about the match because we do have to do that because we're required to by our podcast standards to do
Hmm.
so. I mean, I guess we're not required, but we're going to anyways. And
Our
then we'll
show,
talk.
we can just come back and talk about the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which I watched over the weekend as well. That was also way more interesting than
Well,
this
you've watched a
match.
lot of movies over the weekend. You've pulled a Valair weekend with movies, but yeah, we'll talk about that right next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we also have a Patreon, if you did not know. We do announce our new Patreon members and all that stuff on the show. We thank everybody that is a Patreon member. It's just $5 a month that helps keeps the lights on for what we do. We love doing the show. Uh, not as well. No, I still love doing the show, even with days where we have to talk about horrible Nashville SC matches. Like it's still fun to do. And even when stuff is going on, we want to keep doing the show every single week. So please, if you could subscribe to the Patreon, that would be fantastic. Pharmasoccer.com as well is there. So check that out if you want any more information on us or where all of our stuff is at. It's all at pharmasoccer.com. So, anyways, um, I think this is one of the times where our between segment conversations are probably going to be longer than the actual conversations about the match specifically. Nashville, of course, going into Montreal and getting the 0-0 draw there. Um, Look, when I was watching the I went to the DC United match. When I was watching the DC United match, I saw the lineup and I'm like, wow, it's really good to have all of these players back in. Walker Zimmerman getting the start again, Shaq Moore getting the start again, starting to seem like these players are to a good, healthy spot. It did seem interesting to not have Yearwood in that starting lineup, but it does seem like going back to this four back, to try and keep things. Do you think it's to keep things a little bit more simple in the meantime, or do you think it's just no, this three back didn't work? Let's go back to a back four.
Uh, I think it was just to put more good play, like we talked about this last week, put more good players closer together, like playing in their natural positions. And I think that that makes sense. And so I don't really have a problem with it. The Yearwood thing, I put that on the rundown, which is why I brought it up. But the Yearwood thing stuck out to me specifically because Yearwood's best match for Nashville was against Montreal at home. And I know you didn't
Absolutely.
get to watch as much of it because your back was to the game for part of it, because that was your return to Geodis Park. But he forced turnovers. He had 2 assists in that game. Like he was a large reason why Nashville was so, I mean, difficult to play for Montreal that last time. Like
Oh yeah,
they
it was
just
his
kept
best
getting
match
punched in
for
the
sure.
face. And Yearwood was a huge reason for that. And so Montreal's not very good, as we discussed last week. And so I thought we might see something a little bit more aggressive and attack minded. And that's just not what we saw. I mean, I think it's the best collection of players like in a lineup that you could probably put out there other than that. Like I
Mhm.
don't really have a problem with the starting 11. And honestly, I think it's explainable, but on the basis that the way the game played out, like Yearwood should have been playing.
Right, and
And,
it
and
and,
you
and it
notice when he first got in, one of the first things he did was set up a half chance. And so it's like he made an impact, pun intended, when he got on the field, albeit very minor. And there was just, I mean, but that tells you how bad that game was, is that we're talking about half chances and picking out things because there just wasn't a lot there.
right.
Um, I felt like I almost wonder if the physicality shown by Montreal in the early goings affected the way that Nashville was approaching the game. So
Hmm.
like Schaffelberg got hit a couple times and there wasn't a card, and he got kicked in the stomach at one point and there wasn't a card, which was crazy to me. But I do wonder if that kind of changed the way that Nashville was playing, maybe like they didn't like intentionally change it, but it sort of changed. It made the game play out a little bit different because it was so much more physical at the start. And but honestly, like I feel like I'm really just grasping at straws. It was just a bad performance. I mean,
I
55
mean,
possession for Montreal and just not great.
yeah, I mean, it looks. I mean, even if it was your typical, Nashville match on an away trip, and like Montreal is not an easy trip to make as well, and I think people would agree with that. It's, going into a different country. It's tough. It's definitely difficult, but there was nothing that Montreal put out there that suggested that they have changed over the past few weeks where Nashville didn't have the opportunity to go out there and at least get a goal or two to then try and hold it off. I mean, they Montreal did not have anything in position as well. When it came to, what they were doing on the pitch. Like it's not like this is one of those things where Montreal actually did have a really good performance. No, Nashville here in this instance just had a really bad performance. And then it's one of those things where one way that you can help out with that is by making a switch, by making some switches, making some changes to try and, kind of put some energy out there, try to, get a different vibe going. And it just doesn't seem like Nashville has that either. Sam Surridge coming out in the 67th minute, same thing with Tyler Boyd coming out in the 67th minute. Nothing against, again, Teal and Alex Maweel, but I mean, when you're looking for that kind of offensive progression, like where do you go? This also does this like it makes the Mackenzie Gaines trade a little weird as well, just because I do think Mackenzie Gaines did bring that specific offensive impact, just because he was a quick player, so it kind of changed things a little bit. Um, but like, who do we have on the bench that we're going to use in an offensive standpoint that's really going to change a game?
Well, again, that goes back to like if you get your best 11 on the field in terms of like what you think your best 11 is, oftentimes that means you leave less on the bench for a change. Like Teal Bunbury is really the only dependable offensive person that you can throw out there that can go out and maybe score something. And he had a couple little flashes when he came on, but yeah, it's I'll never get over the fact that this team is fourth in the league in payroll because there's just not a whole lot on the bench. Now, we would feel a whole lot differently about that, even with one or two more players. And that's what the crazy thing about MLS is like
Yes,
Randall Leal is healthy. Well, now you've got Randall Leal on the bench or Tyler Boyd on the bench along with Bunbury, and that changes your entire perception of the bench. Just having
agreed.
one more player. And so that's what you really want to see happen in the winter or in the winter. Wow. In the winter too, but also in the summer. Like you want to see some changes there because you have to justify like if you're willing to spend this much, then you probably got to cut some guys and make some big changes to try and give you some options on the bench. And I find it interesting that you didn't use my very descriptive version of this game in from our rundown in describing how we really felt about
I was waiting to see how long we could get into this segment specifically about it before we did get there. You also gave me some smack the last time I brought up our very serious rundowns that we put together for this show. So I figured I'd wait to see if you would bring it up or not. But if you want to,
it
if you,
was it was an extremely frustrating, mind-numbingly boring ass waste of everyone's time is what I wrote down for the way that game played out. It wasn't great. I might be a little bit cynical this week for some reasons, but what I will say, and this part, now let's turn the page. This is the part that I think is something that you can point to, and that was a clean sheet on the road. Do you know the last time Nashville had a clean sheet in the league on the road?
Hasn't been this year, I don't think, right?
October 7th, 2023.
Wow.
And that was a scoreless draw with Philadelphia. And that is the last time that this team got a clean sheet on the road. Now, that makes two clean sheets in the last three matches. And that is something that, look, for better or worse, the foundation of this team is defense. The money's been put into defense, the coaching has been put into defense. I think that it's overly simplistic at times, the way that people focus on it, but that's where it is. And if you're going to get right the ship, the biggest problem this first part of the season has been giving up too many goals.
Right.
And so now there's two clean sheets in the last three matches, a clean sheet on the road, albeit against bad teams. That is at least something. That's
Right.
somewhere you can start.
It,
And maybe whatever happens at Cincinnati. But if you can keep this sort of defensive setup going and keeping the other team from scoring, eventually you hope that you'll find the back of the net once or twice with Sam Surge and Hani Mukhtar, because that's what you're paying them for.
right. And we talked about it. It's getting we talked about it when even before Gary Smith was let go, we were talking about how do we get back to square one? How do we get back to the point where the defense is the main target, the main thing that we talk about, the main thing that we work with. And that's what it's kind of, even if it's ugly, like against a team like Montreal, where Montreal has been able to show that they can score even at home. But like if you go in and get another 0-0 at Cincinnati, like I'll be pretty okay with that because Cincinnati has proven they're a really good team, and I'll talk about that in the next segment when it comes to their result against Toronto. Um, but I want to talk about I want to lay what you talked about as well in the first segment to what you talked about when it comes to the players that we're going to be bringing in the summer. You want that managerial position to be taken care of and done with so that they can also have a say in what goes on in that summer. What is the one attacking piece that they do want to bring on in the summer? So I do think the correlation between the both of those timelines and impacts is going to be very interesting, and that window is definitely closing. Um, so you really hope that that timeline is not too close, and that whoever that new manager is does have a say in what player, attacking player does get to be brought in. Because I absolutely agree with you. It is one player that we could have, one or two players on the bench that could make that difference.
And I think it's fair to assume that there will be at least one coming in. There was specific mention made of the U22s at the Mike Jacobs press conference following the Atlanta game. I think that if they're not going to use the international slot on Ajago, that tells you that they have somebody that they have in mind for that spot. Who might already have an agreement on the table. They're just waiting to get to the point where they can announce it. Um, we'll see if that can help anything.
Right.
Unfortunately, the likelihood of someone joining the league in the middle of the year and being effective is pretty small on the basis of like the history of newcomers to MLS. But there have been people who have hit the ground running. So we will see on that end of things.
If there's anything that we know about players joining the summer not being effective, it's our team that specifically knows that because no matter what, we still do it every single year.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I was just thinking about this and I went back and just looked the defensive side of things. It's interesting, right? Because you go back and you look at it, the last six games,
Mhm.
San Jose, the goal is when Dan Lovitz screws up on the offside trap.
Right.
1-1. Montreal, Walker Zimmerman own goal. Charlotte, Walker Zimmerman getting bullied. Very clear mistake.
And
Clean
Jack Mayer
sheets,
getting bullied.
pretty, yeah, well, both of them had a rough minute. But other than that minute, is fine. Toronto, clean sheet. Atlanta United, kind of a failed clearance leads to a goal, and then a clean sheet. So, like, while making mistakes is part of having it, not making mistakes is part of having an effective defense. When you go back and look at the last six matches, um, it's not as leaky as it feels like at times. Like there has been, I mean, mistakes, they have to cut down on mistakes. We've said that for years, but like it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, I don't expect Walker Zimmerman to make that mistake again. And so there is some like things to look at trend wise defensively compared to the first part of the season where Nationals given up 5 goals to LAFC, 3 goals to Inter Miami twice, 2 goals to LA Galaxy. There are
Right.
some things that you can look at that maybe there has been a slight turn of the tide that we just haven't fully realized yet.
I like Clay starting off cynical and then getting to the point where he just turned into this positive research person, and it's terrific. For some reason, I just decided to get a John Cadiz end of the season score goal update at this time, and he currently has 15 goals in 30 matches. So that's awesome. Good for you, John. I appreciate it. Um, Look, we did pretty good, Clay. Like, we were shocked if we were going to make it 15. Don't get me wrong. I think we talked about specifically the match for, I don't know, 3 minutes, but we did it.
Yeah, there's your Montreal segment.
We're going to talk about a little bit about the league, and then of course we have another dual week coming up, and like Clay has stated, it's a big one. So we're going to talk about that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on your Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And like I said, we also have a Patreon. Helps keeps the light. I'm going to get that eventually. It just feels so weird to say, or I'm just going to say something different. But if you want to help support the show, $5 a month on our Patreon, we truly do appreciate it. Thank you all to our Patreon members that we do have. We love you. You're the best. And pharmasoccer.com as well. Um, I did watch a decent more MLS this weekend as well than I thought I would. There was some entertaining matches that were going on for sure. Real Salt Lake has been a ton of fun to watch when it just comes to their team specifically. Um, Same thing. There's always just, it seems like a lot of goals, but a lot of comebacks. The Colorado Minnesota match was a lot of fun to watch as well. Um, Unfortunately, also the Cincinnati match was really good. uh, Extremely unfortunate that I hate. I don't like talking about them being good. It's just not fun, but they're a really good team. Um, there was a fight between Ricky Pooch and Ben Olsen, so that was also really fun to see. I love a good coach player fight. And Ricky Pooch looks like a Dragon Ball character, so that's also great.
Yeah, the Cincinnati thing is a little annoying. I saw Andrew Levy post over the weekend saying like that they do everything the right way and they're showing that their, ambition is like justified and what they're doing and the way that they're moving is like they're making all the right moves. And it's just very strange to hear the things that used to be said about Nashville, said about the team that had 3 consecutive wooden spoons. And
Yeah, it seems like we all forget about those. I definitely don't forget about those.
yeah,
I do not
but
forget about all the shenanigans, but yeah.
what I will say is, that goes back to what I've said on this show so many times, is that a lot of times when people talk about turning Nashville around, they talk about as if it's this big, heavy project that will take a lot of work and may take years to pay off. Cincinnati got turned around in about a half a year. So
Hmm.
that should be pretty, I mean, that should be pretty kind of encouraging for a Nashville team that already has its own, Lucho Acosta, like that already has a guy who's an MVP in the league and can create a lot. You can turn things around quickly if you do it the right way. And everything that Cincinnati, unfortunately, has done in the last year has been doing it the right way. And that's also what happens when you basically say you're going to depend on the way the Philadelphia Union have operated as your method of operations, because the Union are a team that up until basically this year has done everything the right way for the last several years. And so it's annoying that it's Cincy. I would rather it be Chicago. It's annoying that it's Cincy, but um, it is that should be encouraging to a lot of Nashville fans.
Yeah, look, Chicago didn't look terrible from what I saw on Saturday without Shaqiri on. Like I said, they actually looked pretty good. Another team, though, that didn't look good at all, and I still do not understand how Caleb Porter is not fired as New England, because they're just also bad. But we'll talk about that and give our predictions about these matches here in just a second. But first, do you have any? I think you put it on the rundown of local soccer updates. Do you have anything that you want to talk about in that way, Clay?
Yeah, we've got a few things going on. As you know, I am a big supporter of Nashville Rhythm, which is a local WPSL team, plays in Nashville. They've been around as long as basically anybody. They had no game this past weekend. They're back in action on June 1st against the Georgia Impact. They're real good. So, defending conference champions, got to keep an eye out for them. Nashville Wolves did not play this past week. They will open up their home season against Decatur also on June 1st. And then TSC is not in WPSL. They've got a team in USL2 and they've got a USLW team. Uh, a lot of these guys are guys that played for Tennessee Soccer Club, went to college. Now they're playing for the USL team kind of in between seasons. And they play at Nolensville High School for their home games. And so the TSC men, they lost 4-1 to Dothan. So they play at Nolensville High School. They actually back in action tonight against East Atlanta, and then they will play again at home against Dothan. So try and do better than that 4-1 loss over the weekend. And then lastly, and this is the reason it's last, the TSC women opened their home season against Athens SC.
Okay,
Do you want to know how many goals they scored?
I do. I'm gonna guess five.
More,
What?
more,
Seven?
more,
Nine?
more.
What?
So
12?
more, the TSC women beat Athens SC 15-0 at Nolensville High School over the weekend.
That's just
So,
that's just rude. That's just
so they seem to be pretty okay in the USLW. So they're back in action on Friday at Greenville. So lots of seem to be some pretty good teams in the area, especially the TSC women and the Rhythm. So if you want to see a lot of goals scored and maybe some catharsis from watching Nashville SC not score, maybe go out check out one of those two teams play.
goal differential if is a thing if it is a thing in this league, I have a feeling they're going to be perfectly okay with that result. I'd be curious about Athens other results just to see how terrible they actually are and if this is a normal occurrence. Absolutely, I figured you'd be doing this for sure. And as you're doing that, I would like to talk about Nashville SC's week upcoming because like we said, there is a two-match week. Wednesday against Cincinnati. It's so weird because normally I would say like Cincinnati is such a big match for Nashville SC. But just kind of the way what this team is going through and the way this orchestrated, this match doesn't have as much heat, I think, as it normally would. Um, where I think you were right. I think Saturday is an extremely large barometer from Nashville when it comes to playing New England, where it is a team that is specifically worse than yours. Like, I believe it was Tom Bogart or Matthew Doyle that talked about the numbers behind how bad New England is. Um, and they are just generally like they are the worst team in the league by a decent amount. So it is a team that Nashville does have the ability to beat even with the position that they're at. And I think that's kind of why the Cincinnati match, I think part of it's being a weekday away match. It just doesn't have that sting, and you kind of expect and you know what Nashville's game plan is going to be.
Yeah, I mean it's really if Nashville gets a result in Cincinnati, you have to think it's going to be a scoreless draw or a 1-1 draw. It's hard to really see them getting a win, especially a Cincinnati team that seems to, especially at home, find a way to get a result at the end, which is unfortunately something we used to say about NSC. But that being said, of the teams that have played in Cincinnati over the last 2 years, I think very few have had the type of success that Nashville has had.
That's
Nashville has
true.
certainly gotten results against the Cincinnati team that won the Supporter Shield. And if we're sitting here next week and Nashville won 1-0 off a Hani Mukhtar penalty, it wouldn't be surprising. It would be, well, it would be surprising but not shocking. Like, it'd be like, oh, well, that tracks.
Right.
Nashville, like, I'm totally expecting maybe Nashville beats Cincinnati, then loses to New England at home.
Oh, for sure. That'd
Like,
be the most
like,
Nashville thing to have happened
that
too.
that that is what they do. So, but I really do think it's going to be a tough ask in a midweek to go to Cincinnati and get a result. And then New England, I think that there's a lot riding on New England. If they don't beat New England, like I said in the first segment, there's some really clear questions that need to be asked about what we're doing.
Well,
Uh,
let's just do predictions and plugs and stuff like that right away.
Yes. So to answer the question that went left unanswered earlier, Athens FC has played 3 matches, and it's not as embarrassing as you think. They lost 2-1 to Birmingham Legion, and they lost 3-0 to Chattanooga Red Wolves. And then they
Okay.
lost 15-0 to Tennessee SC. So, good luck to them the rest of their season. You can check me out at Clay Lessel on Instagram and Twitter. If you feel so obliged, I have a link to a GoFundMe for my sister-in-law's fight with ovarian cancer, which will see her getting transferred down to Houston for continuing care. So if you feel in any way compelled to support that, please check out the GoFundMe on either of those pages. And then as far as results go, I think Nashville's going to lose 2-1 in Cincinnati, and this is rare. Me picking a loss on here, so let's hope that it's wrong. And they're going to win 1-0 against New England.
At PH Stephen HD on my social medias, but no, go to Clay's social medias. Please contribute to that GoFundMe if you do feel like you feel so inclined. Um, Clay's been going through it for sure. Just as a we do this show, but he's a really good friend as well, and like your support is really needed for him and his family at this time. So please go to Clay's page, go to the GoFundMe and do that. That'd be amazing. As for me. I'm There's going to be it. Okay. This is going to be the week. It is a 6 point week. Absolutely a 6 point week. Nashville 1-0 win in Cincinnati on Wednesday with a goal from Sam Surridge. It'll be like the 5th minute where he scores this goal. Like it'll be under 10. He scores a goal in like in some dumb mistake, and then we just typical Nashville fashion, 1-0. And then it would be a 2-1 win against New England where we have to get like some last minute goal or something like that. Hani Mukhtar and Drew Yearwood score.
If Nashville beats Cincinnati, do you think they get rid of Roomba Mentali so they don't have to figure out a way on how to keep him instead of whoever they bring?
So okay, so the Washington Spirit, like again, I'm not going into this. So they're bringing in Barcelona's manager that just won the Champions League. But they have won like 5 matches in a row with their interim manager or in like third or second place in the NWSL. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you have that happen? But I have no idea.
That's
But
what happened to Seattle
yeah,
when they got rid of Siggy Schmid. They made Schmetzer manager, interim manager, and they kept the interim tag on him. And then he won MLS Cup. And they're like, well,
I
I
guess
guess
we
we're
have to
gonna keep
hire this guy now. Hey, maybe we'll have that experience and win MLS Cup. You never know. Thank
yeah.
you again so much for listening to the show. We really do appreciate it, even with the busy week happening. Sorry we came out a day later. Blame Valaire for being in Belize. I am. So again, thank you so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate it. We will be back next week. I believe we will have a Valaire next week as well to talk about this busy week. Hopefully, we have a little bit more to talk about when it comes to the matches specifically. But who knows? It's Nashville SC, so we never have an idea.
Two things. One, we've shifted from blame Amari to blame Valaire, it seems. And then also, and I'm sure Valaire will appreciate this, if Nashville gets 6 points this week, he has to stay in Belize. I think that's the rule.
Agreed. All right, I'm glad we're on the same page here. All right, that would be unbelievable. That would be unbelievable. All right, thank you all so much again. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of your week.